Welcome to Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, a podcast by Chefalo Consulting, where we share the knowledge, stories, and resources you need to create a trauma-informed culture that supports wellness, growth, and resilience. I'm your host, Shenandoah Chefalo. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited that you're joining us for another episode of Mindful Management. I cannot wait to introduce you to our next guest. I'm so excited to delve into her expertise. So today we are delighted to welcome Dr. Laura Gabayan, a distinguished physician, author, and researcher who's dedicated to exploring the scientific dimensions of wisdom and its application in leadership. A storied career that spans over 2 decades, Dr. G has conducted extensive research into the psychological and neuroscientific aspects of wisdom, culminating in her book, Common Wisdom, that you should go out and get right now. A graduate of UCLA, her professional journey includes significant contributions in emergency medicine and transformative insights into the elements that constitute a wise life. At the helm of the Wisdom Research Project, Dr. G's work continues to impact leaders and organizations advocating for mindful management through her identified 8 life skills essential for leadership success. Dr. G, welcome. We're so glad to have you on today's program.
Thank you for having me.
So we got to start at the beginning because you are a serious doctor, a dedicated scientist, I say, right? How does one go from medicine to wanting to research wisdom?
So in 2013, I started to develop random symptoms and weakness. And as you can see, it's a lot of weakness all over, and my speech is slurred. And I found out later what it was, but I was taken aback that how medicine, something I was very into, of course, because I'm a physician and a researcher, was so ready to put me in a box and was so ready to label me as something they knew. And so I was like, well, who thinks outside the box? And it was the wise. And this took a while. I mean, I started developing symptoms in 2013. I probably did not look at wisdom per se until COVID. So it took a while for me to realize, you know what, this is not working. And by looking at wisdom, I realized, what we know is very anecdotal. It's very subjective, and I don't do well with subjective. I'm very objective, very unbiased. And so I was like, well, no one has really looked into what wisdom is. I'll do it myself. So I looked into the research behind it, and that's how I do all projects. And so I found out that, wait, it's special to a region. So that's why we stuck to North America. Those with the greatest amount of wisdom are ages 50s, 60s, 70s. And that's why I only interviewed people in the age range of 50 to 79. And it's not different based on gender or race, but it is different based on, as I said, region. And it's not different based on political affiliation. And it's interesting because I just did the background. I hired a research assistant. I hired a marketing specialist. And I was like, well, we can't decide who is wise, but other people can identify them. So you can't identify a wise person based on a test or a survey or anything, but you can based on what another person thinks. So that's why I started asking around, do you know someone wise? And I spoke with clergy, community leaders, random people. And I wanted to know if they knew someone wise. And that's how this happened.
So it's interesting. So based on that, we can't identify ourselves as wise, but we can identify someone else as wise.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I defined it as 8 elements, and humility was one of them. So saying you are wise is not necessarily humble.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about the 8 elements, Dr. G. You define them consisting of these 8 elements. And how do you believe that each of those contributes specifically to just being a better person, but maybe in the context of what we're talking about today, how it makes you a better leader?
So I feel like they're related. And based on my research, we found that the first one was the most prevalent, and it was resilience, kindness, positivity, spirituality, humility, tolerance, creativity, and curiosity. And the reason the book is called Common Wisdom is because these were the elements common to the people that I spoke with.
Okay. So that's a lot of things though. So how do we break down and I just know your science brain because all of those words that you gave us, right? Resilience, kindness, positivity could have like the word wisdom itself, so many different moving parts and pieces, right? Like is it kind to tell somebody no? Is it right? Like we could argue kind of what does that mean and what does that look like? So how are you able to pinpoint those characteristics and what do those characteristics mean?
So we use a type of research, it's called qualitative research, that takes different themes and clumps them together. So, for example, positivity had gratitude in it and had humor in it too. So, if someone that I spoke with was very funny, and humor was a big part of their life, they fell under positivity. Or if someone said, "Oh, they keep a gratitude jar or gratitude journal or random gratitude acts," then they also fell under positivity. So, and that's where the scientific comes in. And initially, we started with about 20 different themes, and then we kind of collapsed them into the eight.
So tell us, I want to focus in on one of them, and it's actually the first one you mentioned, which was resilience, because I think in the modern workplace, especially in a post COVID workplace, there's been a lot of talk around resilience. So, can you, and we cite it as a crucial skill for leadership, can you just talk to us about in your research what you found to be maybe some key practices or ways in which we can cultivate resilience both individually and in teams?
Resilience is a mindset, and it's definitely something you can teach others too. If you're resilient, others are as well. And a business is going to encounter a lot of obstacles, internal, external obstacles. And the idea with resilience is each obstacle is really an opportunity. It's an opportunity for growth. And also, when you think of resilience, you think of each obstacle there to teach you something. And that's a lot of what the people I spoke with were about. They had gone through amazingly difficult events. And so when I lost my home in January, I was like, well, these people have gone through worse. I can deal with it. This is so hard, but I can deal with this. And they really had gone through a lot. And just it's a perspective. Resilience is a perspective. And that's why I feel like all 8 elements in my book Conquer with Them are related. And I feel like if you are positive, it helps to be more resilient as well. But as a company encounters, let's say, a fall in revenue, or if they have a competition that make something better. It'll test them to be better. It won't be fun. It's not easy. But I think the idea of resilience is you will get over it. You'll get through it. You will. The idea is also think of it as happening for you and not to you.
Yeah, I love that. I So we know, like, the research that came out of the Center of the Developing Child from Harvard found that resilience really is a learned behavior, right? It's something that, regardless of your age, regardless of your circumstance, you can learn to be resilient. Do you find that to be true with the other seven on your list? Can you learn to be kind? Can you learn to be positive? Can you learn to be humble? Like, are they innate to people, or do you think all of these eight things are things that we can learn and strive and work towards?
I think we can all learn them. I do think it takes time. I think,
Yeah.
for example, I was born in the Middle East and grew up with much kindness. It was not something revered there, and my parents didn't believe in kindness. But my husband
Mm.
was very kind, and my second element, which surprised me, was kindness. And I still,
Mm.
to this day, may say or do things that she doesn't like because it's not kind. And so I think it takes time. I mean, I've been married for 18 years and it takes time. So I broke down wisdom because I'm a researcher and I want to kind of define what things are. But I think I also broke down for people to realize I'm good at this. And I broke calm wisdom because I want people to realize I'm good at this and I'm not good at that. I'm going to build on that. I'm going to build my spirituality. I was not a spiritual person at all. Being in medicine, I was not. And now I've become much more. So I think it's something you can build inside you.
And do you think that that's something, because look, you got into this because of your experience, not just because you were a physician, but then you became a patient, right? And sort of that in between space of physician and patient yourself. Do you think it's something that, especially in the medical community, because I do a lot of work in public health and hospital systems, and on its face, those two things that you sort of said, spirituality and kindness and empathy, sometimes feel like they're missing.
Yeah, they're not there. I remember at being a physician, going to residency, if someone called you, oh, that doctor is so nice, that was essentially saying that's not a good doctor, but he's nice. So that was like a put down. So being kind and nice was not. But the funny thing is when you get out of residency, the people who you connect with, that you want in your circle, that you connect with in general, are those that were nice. Because that's what you want to have. And I've had like I'm as a neuro doctor, you interact with different specialties. And so I remember once I had a surgeon come down and talk to me in a poor way. And I said to him, I said, you're not gonna do well when you get out. Is this how you talk to people? Because people don't like it.
Yeah. And is that, I mean, it ties back again to some of these eight that you're talking about. But one, do we have to be humble enough to recognize where there's space to grow for us personally? And I'm thinking also on the organizational level of that. And then what is the space? And this is a conversation I'm having a lot, Dr. G, with my staff, is around a word that I have found really difficult to kind of grasp, which is tolerance. It's something that I talk about self-awareness and tolerance and the balance of those. But tolerance to me, as I've begun researching just that part of tolerance in its many facets about, well, do I have to tolerate you, right? As just being the human being that you are, Dr. G, which doesn't feel great, right? Or what's the tolerance of, listen, in relationships and in people, you're not always getting your way. And there are going to be these little pieces of people that you do have to tolerate. But when is toleration going too far and taking advantage, right? All of those little pieces of it.
When they asked me, they're like, was tolerant, does tolerance mean putting up with something? I go, no, tolerance is treating another human in an unbiased way, not having judgment. Look, I get it that we have education and we have a lot of things where that influence our thoughts beforehand, But then say you look at someone and you have no judgments about, and being ethnic, I felt that, being Persian, I have felt people being intolerant. I look back and I'm like, don't assume, don't judge, just give people the benefit of the doubt.
I love that. So, in your phrasing of tolerance, because I think it's such a really important one when people hear is how do you have the curiosity to be non judgmental?
Well, this is so funny because in my book, I talked about how curiosity was the last element, and both creativity and curiosity, number 7 and 8, are the last elements in communism because the way we assign someone creativity and curiosity was totally based on them saying the word. Whereas all the other elements, if they were humble, if they were spiritual, if they talked about a bigger power, whatever it was, they got that element. But curiosity and creativity, no. But even though curiosity was the last element, I feel like it's the foundation of all of them. And I feel like tolerance starts with you just being curious about someone else. Because no, and that's where humility starts too, is that you thinking you know everything is not the way life is. And so it shouldn't make you feel big to make others feel small with humility. And tolerance, I think it's just being curious about why, who, what, when, where. Throw an English in there too, but just being curious about it as well. That helps.
Yeah, this is so fascinating for me because I just see so many parallels that we talk about when we're talking about human centered work. And so I'm wondering, on the piece around tolerance, have you seen any strategies or initiatives that promote tolerance in a diverse workplace setting? Like, because I think this is a lot where we can also get stuck, right? We can think it, we have the knowledge. I don't want to be judgmental. I want to check my own personal bias, but then there's the reality of actually doing it, right? So how do we cultivate that and how do we promote that in a workplace setting?
I think in a workplace, when you're thinking about being promoting more tolerance, before I think just going down to the basics. When someone is thinking about someone else, start with all those questions: why, what, when, where, and before you even get to it, they'll realize that they have some biases. They realize that they have some assumptions. Just breaking down what their own thoughts are will help, and why they have those thoughts.
I love that. So, Dr. G, I was on your LinkedIn page, tooling around, finding out all about you. And if I dare say, I found something pretty wise buried in there. And it was actually a recent post where you were talking about the Palisades fire. And the post itself was really quite lengthy, but you had this sentence in there. And I just want to dive into it with you a little bit. You said, healing isn't about rushing to feel better. It's about allowing yourself the space to process, grow, and reframe.
Well, it's funny because it's also kindness is in there as well. So I think by healing, it's allowing yourself the time too, and realizing, oh my God, I'm going through a lot. It's been a hard time, and I deserve this time or this wherever it is. No, don't put pressure on yourself. Like there's no, that's when I talk about how you shouldn't have assumptions of when things should be done, no expectations, because you never know. And expectations just put this pressure that is not needed.
Yeah, so kindness there isn't just about being kind to others, it's also about the kindness and grace we give ourselves, right?
I think kindness starts with that. And it starts with being kind to yourself. So, for example, I was never kind to myself. I worked really hard. I did not like partake in anything that I loved. I love meditation and now I meditate. And so I think that's part of it's doing something, even if it's 10 minutes a day. It's telling yourself, I'm worth it. Because if you don't do it for yourself, the thought, I mean, you probably won't do it for others either.
Yeah. It's such a big piece. The other thing that we didn't talk about in those 8, but you just mentioned there that I wanna revisit is time. Because it seems to me, especially in the Western world, especially here in the United States, where it's like, we're here at work, we're supposed to get as many things done as we possibly can get done. I've seen this in the healthcare space many of times. Like, we got to get as many of these tasks done. But I'm just wondering what the toll of that is on us, on patients, on organizations when we're only time focused, when we're trying to shove as much instead of this idea of it's a journey and it's going to get done when it gets done. What have you found in your research around?
That's hard to reframe, but it's part of what we are like in the Western world. We're very productive, very CV building type, right? I was into building my CV. How much more can I get done? Instead of thinking quality over quantity, right? All these phrases you hear are wise phrases over years. And it really is. And I've heard of this before. People start being more intentional, they start being kind to themselves, and they're more productive or they can do more things, and so I think just ticking off the boxes and doing is not, it's more important of, it's funny because I recently or last year when I went to Europe with my husband, I can't walk around. So I was staying in a wheelchair and I was just looking around, and then he was running around doing wherever. And I'm like, well, I'm being what he is doing. And he's like, that sounds so woo woo. And I'm like, well, that's the reality. I'm enjoying just being here. I'm enjoying, and it's funny because it wasn't fun for me to just accept my reality. It wasn't. I didn't enjoy just not being mobile, but I enjoyed sitting there and looking around and just being.
Yeah, it's an interesting piece. I'm so glad that you brought that up, especially that you were on vacation doing this thing with your spouse, because I find myself in this situation quite often, especially when traveling or on vacation. I seem to catch myself in it more often, where people are doing the things and they're like, "Don't you want to do the thing?" And I'm like, "I just want to watch the thing." And it's not about, for me, it's not about the participation or like I'm nervous to participate or do. It's just about taking the space to see everything that's going on. And I find that with the phones in modern day where people want to take photos and videos of everything. And I'm like, but just be here. You don't need the photo or the video. Just be in the space and enjoy what being present looks like for just a few minutes.
It's hard to do in the Western world. Very like productivity focused. And we have books on 100 things to do before you die or whatever, right?
So as you look at the next decade in this new area of research that you're developing around wisdom, what do you feel like needs further exploration? What do you think is still missing that maybe we don't have the answers to, or where we need to spend more time, not just in qualitative, but in quantitative as well?
I don't know if I would do more work investigating. I would definitely do more work in trying to implement. Having people realize that these 8 elements in common wisdom that I identified are not, wisdom is not very graspable by most people. You can't grasp it, you don't understand it. It's not something relevant. But the 8 elements are more of a way to live a good life, succeed in business, to live a good life, to be a good this, be good that, excel in whatever you're doing.
So as you think about that and reflecting on your own experience before you started on wisdom, since you've done the work around wisdom, cultivating your own wisdom, Dr. G, what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
I would definitely like I lived in fear most of my life. I was always fear of getting to med school, fear of getting to good residency, always fear. And I would say live in faith, don't live in fear. Things will work out and don't be so afraid.
What do you think the rest of us need to know? What's something that you have found that was maybe simple, easy, a shift in thought that the rest of us could adopt into our lives if we gave it a thought?
I would say that. I would say live in faith, don't live in fear. I would say if everyone, I'm sure I had anxiety my whole life. I'm sure I had it now too. And I'm sure if everyone just took a breath and lived thinking it'll be okay, I'm gonna hope and pray and it'll be okay. I'll still do everything, right? You'll still work hard, but you're gonna do your best and not come from fear. So that would be my advice for everyone.
I love that. Um, I can't wait to get into our quick fire questions with you, Dr. G. Any last thought you're thinking? Anything you want to share with our audience about what they should know about these 8 elements?
As you said, I feel like they're definitely a combination of someone who is very Western focused, left brain, scientist, and bringing in something that is considered more woo woo. So it's a combination of it, and just knowing the process it took and how hard it was to find physically, I think that what's in there is a gold mine. I think if anyone can get their hands on it will feel like, wow, this has really changed my life.
Dr. G, I look at this list and it overlaps so much with what we talk about with human centered work that I am waiting for you to write a book on each one of these. Now I see an 8-book series in your future, and that this was just maybe the culmination. But I think to the point that we were talking about, each one of these is so deep and so nuanced. And there's so many ways in which we can innovate and stimulate all of these within us and the people around us.
Well, in December, I published a Calm Wisdom Journal. People just love the questions I had at the end of Calm Wisdom, and the journal has more of that. And I think it can also allow everyone to think deeper about every one of the 8 elements. And I agree with you. I think that each one can be a book, but I'm done. I'm done writing.
Said like a true author until it strikes again. So tell us, Dr. G, what's the latest book or show that you're reading for pleasure, for knowledge, for learning that's caught your attention, and why has it stood out for you?
Well, it's funny because I've not had time. After having lost our home, I was telling someone that it happened in January, but I mean, my closet is still empty. Like things are not there, and it takes time. It'll take a year or two of being busy, of getting things done constantly. So no, I have not had time to read. I do like to go on Netflix and look at a show just to not to unwind, and I enjoyed that, but I haven't found anything right now that I'm focused on.
That you're focused on. We love it. How about this? I know you've interviewed so many people when you were doing the work for wisdom, but if you could have dinner with anyone living or dead, who would you choose? What's the one curious question you'd want to ask them?
I quoted him, I don't know which chapter I quoted him, but I would love to have dinner with Rumi. I feel like he was so ahead of his time, and a lot of what he says it's all of those 8 elements. And I did quote with him in one of my jobs. I don't know which one, but he was so inspirational. I would have loved to meet him.
I love that. I would be curious to know his thoughts on modern living, right? Like Western world, Eastern world, like just the world has changed so much, and how he would apply, to your point, these 8 things, which he definitely talked about, but how he would apply, how he would see that in the modern world would surely be fascinating for all of us.
Oh, I think it's a curse. I think all this technology is a curse. I went to when was the last year I went to Fiji with my family, and I'm like, we have a loneliness pandemic in the US. I'm sure they don't have there. I'm sure they don't have as much technology, but they care about each other more. They enjoy each other friends. I'm sure they don't have this problem here.
Yeah, they're more in community. Yeah. So tell us about hobbies and activities that fill you with joy. What are things that you lose time because it gives you so much joy?
Travel. I love in meeting other cultures and people. I love going to other places because it's a reminder that we are all part of the same family. We're all more similar than we are different. And travel really has been something I've enjoyed since I was, that's it's funny because I say I have not been kind to myself. That's the only thing I have done. And I remember in college, whenever I could, I would go away because I really wanted to meet other cultures and other people.
I love that. Dr. G, it's been fabulous having you on. I've learned so much. I know our listeners have learned a tremendous amount. How can our listeners find you? We'll put links in our show notes to your book, as always, your LinkedIn, but what's the best way to reach you if people wanted to learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
So LauraGabayan.com is the best way. It's a hard way, but Amazon sells my book, Common Wisdom. And I don't know if it offers LauraGabayan.com, the website on Amazon, but I'll look into it. But it's a hard it's a hard name to remember. To remember Common Wisdom.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll put links. So we'll put links to Dr. G's website. We'll put links to her books, both on Amazon and via her website, so that you can find her in all the great things that she's doing. I don't know about all of you and our listeners, but I'll tell you what, one thing we've learned today is be kind, be humble, be curious. And I think even with that, you can get pretty far. Don't you think, Dr. G?
Oh, yes.
Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of Mindful Management. Until next time, please, please, please take care of yourself, go slowly, and enjoy. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. G.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment is brought to you by Chefalo Consulting. To learn more about Chefalo Consulting and our trauma-informed change management and professional development solutions, please visit chefaloconsulting.com. That's Chefalo, CHEFALO, consulting.com. Make sure you don't miss these transformative conversations by subscribing to Mindful Management wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening. And remember, change happens one step at a time.